You're on.
Oh, okay.
Dan, could you just introduce yourself and say what you do here at Toys for Bob?
Sure, my name's Dan Neal and I'm audio director here at Toys for Bob.
And how long have you been here at Toys for Bob? Roughly?
Like 6 years?
6 years.
Yep.
So, I'd like to find out from people deep sources of inspiration here. So, let's go back to your childhood.
Sure.
What did you do as a kid? What did you play with? What did you enjoy doing?
I got my first games machine when I was maybe 7 years old. It was a computer called a BBC-B. As you can hear from my voice, I'm not from the US, I'm from the UK, I'm from Scotland. And the BBC-B was a kind of an educational computer, but it could also play games.
Yeah.
So I spent maybe 4 years fiddling around on that. Had games like Elite, that was kind of like a wireframe space game. Just a whole bunch of games that I used to load off cassette tapes, right? So I don't know if you remember game machines back then, or I guess home computers back then, but you'd have a tape recorder next to them. It would take like a C90, and you put it in, and you'd have to get the volume at the right level, otherwise it wouldn't hear the game right. So at that point you actually loaded video games through sound, right? It was a totally regular cassette tape, and the game was stored as audio, and it would load into the computer. So many happy years. In fact, one year I decorated the room that the computer was in with tin foil. Covered it all in tin foil to make it feel like a spaceship.
Very fitting for Elite.
Right, exactly, exactly. So like, games have been a part of my life since I was little. And then as I went through my teenage years, really interested in music. Played a lot of music, played in bands, still enjoyed video games. And then I really haven't left my childhood. It's just been a continual arc through to 41.
I think that's a pretty common theme, I think, with many people in this industry. So how do you get into sound for video games?
I started as a video game programmer. I did a degree in physics in Scotland, and then my first job was a video game programmer. I moved to London. I started working at a company called Codemasters, making tools. In video game, tools are kind of the supporting software that people use to make games. And that was like in the mid-90s, so they were pretty simple tools. So I started as an engineer, and then from being an engineer I moved through a bit more into game design. Then I made a game about music, and that was when my personal life of playing in bands and DJing collided with my professional life. First game I made that one myself. That was on the PlayStation 2.
What game was that?
That was called MTV Music Generator. It was like a music creation system on a PlayStation, kind of like a music creation package you might get now on iPad or on PC, where you put sounds in and you can choose volumes and effects and that, but made it on a PlayStation. And then from that, after that, I made a game called DJ Hero. That was a game about DJing. It had a plastic controller that let you feel like a DJ. And that was my entry into Activision. Toys for Bob, who made Skylanders, are part of Activision. That's the parent company. So I made that in the UK, and we did DJ Hero for 3 or 4 years, and it was super exciting. And then it came to an end. And then Activision asked me if I'd come over to California, come up here to San Francisco to get involved in Skylanders. See if I could make the audio of Skylanders exciting, which is what I've been doing here now for 6 years.
So you had some experience of this merging the physical with the virtual, in terms of so having a physical product that interacts with the game, with the video game.
Yeah, absolutely. The first one of those, I mean, Guitar Hero would be the first game that did that with music, right? Plastic guitar. DJ Hero kind of was a child of that product, a conceptual child of that product with different music. So I'd already had experience in that world of working with a game that required plastic, something made from plastic to make the game work. So when I came over here, they first showed me Skylanders at Activision's headquarters, and that was in, or still is, in Los Angeles. And I remember this must have been about 9 months before Spyro's Adventure was released. I remember playing it on a Wii, and it didn't have any toys. They just, because when you make a game you set up all these systems so you can kind of test it more quickly. So with Skylanders we had a way of playing the game and changing from character to character without having to have all the physical toys. So I first played the game, without toys. And I was kind of like, quite understand why Activision are kind of betting so big on this, so excited about this game. And then a couple hours later, someone showed me it with the toys when I was down in Los Angeles, and like it really clicked at that point. This is something completely new, right? Putting a toy here, and then the toy goes there into the game. Yeah, that was like that was a really magical. And that made me leave the UK and emigrate. Yeah.
So that's one challenge right there, is taking the toy from the real world into the game. Did sound have a role in that, in terms of creating that illusion of this is going in there? Yeah.
So in the first game we had to create that, we wanted that moment when the toy appeared in the game, when the Skylander moved, right? Conceptually moves, travels magically through space and time and appears in Skylands. We wanted that to feel as big and magical and powerful as possible. So one thing we did was, so with Skylanders, something interesting about it is that the game doesn't even work unless you have a toy. Right? So it comes with a portal, and you have to have the toy on the portal for the game to run. If you take the toy off the portal, the game kind of shuts down. It doesn't turn off, but it kind of goes whoop. So we wanted to, and then when you put
good sound there.
Yeah, exactly. And then you put the toy on, and the game kind of goes whoop back to life again. So what we wanted to do is represent that change in audio. So the way we did that was whenever you're playing the game and you've got the toy on, you pull the toy off, we just slow down all the sounds of the game, right? So just the whole thing, it's like stopping a record. Yeah. The whole thing just stops, and then we have like a drone. It's magic. Yeah. Please put a toy on the portal, and then you put it on, and we go, and then we have a big, and then a big when the Skylander appears on the screen, and then when they first appear, they have their little phrase that they say, their little tagline. So every character has their little catchphrase that they say when they appear in the game. So on the first game, when they first appeared in the game, most of them were gibberish. So by that I mean they didn't really speak in English. It was some of them didn't really have real voices. And I think maybe a few of them in the first game had English. But for the second game in the Skylanders franchise, that was Skylanders Giants. Yeah, we wanted to give them all full English voices, or whatever language you play in the game in. So we made a big change there, and I think that added a lot to that entry moment, added a lot of personality. So yeah, audio was definitely a big part of that, bringing that, what we call the magic moment, that beat where they go into the game. It was really important.
Magic is one of those words in all these conversations I've been having that keeps coming up again and again about the game. Right. What are some other ways that audio is used to sustain that magic, to sort of keep you in that moment of belief, I guess, or investment or immersion in there?
Right. Well, so when you're playing the game, you want to get lost in the game. Audio mostly operates like you're not often conscious of it. Like when you're playing a game, you're not like, oh, listen to that sound and listen to that sound, and oh, I noticed that the UI went ping when I did whatever, right? It operates on a kind of more subconscious level. It takes a lot of hard thinking to kind of get it right, but so our job is kind of almost behind the scenes, mostly behind the scenes. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on, like if you're running by a waterfall, we'll want to make sure there's a great waterfall sound on it. Right. The enemies, you want them to have little voices that sit naturally in the scene. You want the whole thing to feel like a real place, and that takes a lot of effort to kind of get all the sounds of a style that kind of has an aesthetic that works together, and that they all sit together right at the right volumes and they move around right. And then you have music that constantly plays in the game as well. There's a lot of music in Skylanders, and you want the music to follow your mood as you play the game, and that keeps you immersed, right? So if you're exploring, the music supports that. And then if you find some enemies and you start combat, you want the music to kind of rise with you as your excitement rises. And then when you complete it and you want to feel like woo, the music has to come with you. And then so it's kind of both leading your emotion, and it's also tracking your emotion. And if you get that right, it keeps you kind of immersed, but you don't notice it, and that's it's positive. It's kind of good for us, but it's an odd thing for sound designers, because they pour all they pour all this effort into all these fine details that all add up to this thing that if you do it right, you kind of don't even notice it. It just makes you feel good.
How do you know if a sound is either the wrong sound or the wrong music or it's missing? Is that just a feel thing? Like you personally listen to it? Is that because it's the sort of thing you couldn't ask really a focus group. I don't think they'd be able to listen. No, that's not quite right.
There's a missing waterfall sound on level 7, I'm pretty sure. So after a time of playing these games, you get to understand how the game should feel as you play it.
Yeah.
And if something's off, often you're not necessarily kind of looking around the screen, is that making a sound? Is that making a sound? Does that feel right? You're just kind of allowing yourself as a listener to get into that flow state, and then if something's off, it kind of just comes and flicks you in the ear, right? Like something's wrong. It's like if you imagine what an analogy. Imagine if you're listening to someone playing piano and they play a bum note, right? You're just like it kind of it comes out and hits you. You're not like looking for it. It just kind of it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's kind of the same as that, but for like voices or the effects that you use or the sounds or the music. Similar kind of feeling. So I did a lot of that, just playing the game and writing these huge lists of like things that can change and sending them to all the people that work on sound with me. We have a team of, I think at peak we were maybe 5 people.
Who was composing the music, for instance, and that sort of thing, or doing the different atmospheric sounds?
So the way that a sound team works is different for every video game, but the way that our sound team worked is that we had our music composition was done by somebody who isn't part of Toys for Bob. The initial music theme for the first game was written by Hans Zimmer.
Okay.
He's a Hollywood, amazing Hollywood composer who works with movies mostly. And then also by someone who worked with him at the time called Lorne Balfe, who then took over the reins and wrote more and more of the music through the franchise. So we'd work externally with him, explaining to him, showing him screenshots of the level, like, this is a magical castle, come up with some magical castle music, or whatever it is. And we kind of iterate on that with him. And then we have someone here who helps sculpt and shape that music, because when they're creating music for the game, they're not in that flow state I was describing. They're coming up with great, interesting music. And then we have someone who works here who then sculpts it and thins it out and then makes it big and and then plugs that into the game and has that go along with the action. So that's on music. The second piece would be sound effects, and we make those here. In fact, Jason is in charge of the sound effects here, who's standing over there. And that's a very technical job. It's very technically difficult to get sounds plugged. Right, Jason?
Sure.
Very technically difficult to get sounds plugged in. So he layers a lot of sounds. When you hear let's say an enemy shoots his laser gun out, right? When you hear that in game, you might hear like, but what goes into that, what goes in behind the scenes, is Jason might be layering up 20 different sounds from all different places and kind of just timing them just right and getting the volumes of each little component to be different, and then it squashes it all down into one final sound that goes in the game. If you don't do that, then things start to sound kind of generic.
So he's not literally shooting a laser gun with a tape recorder?
No, that never happened. That's normally called Foley recording, is the term for that, when somebody would like snap carrots for breaking an arm, or like stand in a
the old radio, the old-fashioned like sort of the wind machine, the thunder, the sheet metal with the thunder,
or chopping a cabbage for like something. So that would be, so the sound effects often we pull from like big sound libraries. So there are these sound libraries you can get with 500,000 sound effects, so a lot of our content would come from that. We don't actually go out and shoot laser. Although it's a good idea. We maybe should have pushed for a bit more of that.
Bigger budget for the next game.
Bigger budget. We need to first make a laser gun, then shoot the laser gun. So that's sound. And as we mentioned, the last piece would be voices. So I mentioned the voices of the Skylanders. So they have these catchphrases, but they also have a whole bunch of other things that they say. So the voices were recorded down in Los Angeles for the English actors, and then they would send up all the sound files, and we have someone here organizing this enormous number of little small clips of dialogue that would get recorded. And the game was in 12 languages, so even if you get it in English, you need to get it all done again in 12 more languages. So it ends up like 200,000 audio files across 12 languages.
Wow.
And you can't get the German mixed up with the Dutch. And if you get the French and the Spanish, or you get a bit of English in the, the Portuguese,
The localization doesn't work.
it doesn't work. Yeah. And the disc, at the end of a game, you have to give it to like Sony and Microsoft to make sure they're okay with it. And we have our own testing teams, and they won't let it pass. Like if you can't have one word, so we need we have a person who works here who's got a very safe pair of hands, and like unbelievably big spreadsheets of making sure where all the files are coming in. So that's like a really big, almost production management role that we have there. So those are the three main components of the sound and how we make them.
Let's just break there, maybe to start over, because I want to get into the whole sort of role of audio in that, because I think it's an important story, but I don't want to have it be cut. So, sound is obviously an integral part of the game, just as with every video game. But with Skylanders, at different points in the series history, sound has been more important. And the whole idea of trapping the monsters is obviously a big thing. And sound played a really crucial role, I know, in that. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So you're talking about the fourth game in the franchise called Track Team. So the story there is at the start of that project, our studio head Paul Ritchie, I think he initiated the drive for what that game should be, and where he was at was that we have for 3 games put a toy on a portal, and the toy goes into the game. And I think what he wanted to have happen was somehow that you took the character from the virtual, digital, from in your TV, and you get them out, and somehow they go into a toy. And that was kind of where the thinking was. Like, not quite sure how we do that, but a high level, we go that way normally. Right. How can we make this happen? So they experimented in the toy team with different ways of doing it. They tried an LCD screen on a toy. So so that maybe you could suck a character out of the game. Maybe it could live in a toy like a Tamagotchi, something like that. Yeah. Somehow that could be represented like that. And that didn't really work out because of cost, and the representation of the character on an LCD screen was never going to be really characterful because it's low resolution. And you're also putting an LCD screen on every single toy. And we sell millions and millions of toys. Ching, ching, ching. That's an expensive way to go about it. I think they tried some other ways with like projector technology. Either way, the idea of pulling character out of the game was really strong. But in terms of finding a solution in kind of in the visual language, meaning a screen or some projector, wasn't really panning out. And then in our audio team, we struck upon the idea that sound might be able to solve the problem, so the idea was like, maybe if your toy made a noise, it could have the voice of the character that you pulled from the screen, and then it could talk to you. So that seemed like an interesting idea. Another part of that was that to make a noise, we could either put the speaker in the toy, right? So every single Skylander could have a speaker in it. Yeah. And then it could make a noise when you're away from the game. And that sounded pretty cool. But then it would have to have a battery, and that kind of sucks.
And the battery, ruins the magic a little bit.
If it had a battery, it would kind of ruin the magic, right? Because if it's got battery, and now it's just like a regular old toy. It's not a magical Skylander. Right. And you have to have a speaker in every one. So that didn't seem like a great plan. But then we were like, well, maybe we just put the speaker in the portal. So in the base that the toy goes on, we put the speaker in there, then it can be powered through the cable. It doesn't need to go in every toy, and that could feel magical. So we worked up a prototype where you could have a character talking from here, and then you press a button, and then he talks from the TV, and then you press a button, and now he talks from here. And it was like, okay, it's jumping back and forth. This is kind of working. We're missing a piece. We're missing the travel, right? That's one thing that how could you ever do that with a screen, right? With sound, maybe there's a way of representing the movement. So we we thought, well, it'd be really cool if they were kind of being physically thrown back and forth from the game into some kind of trap or holder or something like that. So we recorded audio of like a woo, well, it was a landing at the end, and then woo, with a landing at the end, and then we played that same sound from the television and the portal at the same time, and then we kind of in code we turn the volume down on the TV while we turn it up on the portal, and that gives you this illusion of it going woo, and then landing down here. So then that was working, and we're like, okay, this kind of has the same kind of magic that the original putting the toy in the game has, because you don't really know how it's happening, and you might not be aware that there's a speaker in the portal, but somehow it makes sense. And then with sound in the toy rather than an LCD screen, we can be much richer. Like, we can make jokes. The character can express personality. It still feels like the character. He can complain about being trapped in a toy. And so then Activision really liked that, and that became the kind of the foundation of Trap Team.
Right. That's.
Oh yeah. And there's another piece to it,
Sure.
which was that one of our electrical engineers here at Toys for Bob, called Robert, he thought it'd be cool if the toy would flash as they spoke. So he found some wizardry way to make the toy flash along with the sound. So when it spoke, it looked like somehow it was illuminating the toy as well.
Right.
And so I remember at the very start when some of the younger kids who saw it, they were taking the toy out and like looking in it. Is it?
Yeah.
It had that kind of like,
is he in the crystal room?
Is he really in there? It's like, how is this working? And at that point, it was like, okay, we struck on something magical. So that was it was great.
Yeah.
It was a good journey.
And then there's lots of just fun stuff with sound in the games themselves.
Yeah.
You mentioned a few of the sort of mini game type things with sound and that sort of thing. Tell me about some of those.
Yeah. So like I was saying, normally sound is like under the surface. It hits you on the subconscious. Yeah. On the subconscious level, where we don't really want to be noticed. Right. We just want it to just kind of, you want to just sort of swim in it, and it just wants to absorb you as you play the game and not be aware of it. But then what we wanted to do sometimes was actually have sound come and like slap you in the face. Right. Like, no, notice us. Maybe that's us as a sound team. We're useful too. So there's certain points in the franchise where we did things that kind of jumped out of the norm. So in Giants we had a rapping robot. We called him Drill X. He was a dubstep rapping robot, and we wrote a song for him, and we had like a bouncing ball on screen. There was no like microphone support. It was just because who's going to stop us? Yeah. Let's just do it. It'll be fun. So we put Drill X in that game. We then made a song for Christmas that year, featuring Drill X. So we kind of made this Christmas rap. One of the Alex Ness, who was here and was our writer and was the voice of a lot of the characters. Because he was here, we could record a rap with him. So we made a Christmas song, and then Andy, right over here, made a Christmas video that sat on top of the song, and we released that. Let's see what else we did. In Trap Team, we made a game where you could have your Skylanders rap in the game. So kind of like a Guitar Hero. That's maybe reliving some DJ Hero time now. Let's just put that in the game. So you can kind of press buttons and make your Skylander raps with these little really simple rap battles. And then in Imaginators, what we wanted to do in Imaginators was, as well as all the normal audio stuff of like creating a believable living world with fun music, we wanted to support the core idea of Imaginators, so Imaginators was the sixth game in the series that we made here, and the idea of that game was that you could create your own Skylander. So for us in sound, a big part of making your own Skylander is giving them a voice, giving them a personality through their voice. So we created a lot of voice options that you could pick, and we created a system where you could make your own catchphrase. So that would be, you could pick like the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the catchphrase, and they could fit together. So like a kind of, you could pick any front side with any kind of second part, any first part, and you can make your own catchphrase. And then we had all those voice clips recorded in about 15 different voices across 12 languages, and they'll have to like stitch together. It's just, it was a big job. But I think it worked. I think it added a lot to the personality of the characters you made. And you could pick your own music. In fact, really randomly, we met we met Armin van Buuren last summer at E3. He's a fan of the game.
Okay.
He's like a DJ from Europe.
Okay.
A trance DJ from Europe. Well
Yeah.
known trance DJ. Anyway, he came to the booth when we were at E3 showing off Magic. Is that right? Was it the year before? Yes, no, it was at E3. He came to see us at E3, but we had yet to finish the game. Anyway, he came to see the game and he was like, oh, my kid and my family, we really love this game. Can I be in it in some way? We were like, sure, yeah, we'll put your tracks in. So one of the music options that ended up in the game was you can choose trance music, and it's his music.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then we made a rap hip hop track with Skylander's dad, who's a kind of YouTuber, who's a big fan and supporter of the franchise. So we worked with him and his kids, and we made a rap with them, and we put that over the credits. You know, it's been a great franchise to be kind of uncapped, to allow our kind of uncapped creativity. Yeah. You couldn't do this in a more serious game. Right. A lot of these things, right. It just wouldn't make sense to do this in a.
Yeah, we're breaking the illusion of those games.
Right. So, if you're doing a Call of Duty game or something more, how are you gonna put a rapping robot and all that kind of like silly stuff that we do here? But because Skylanders is so open-ended, right. Both visually and also sonically, it's been kind of a fun park for us just to run around in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good. This is great. One last question.
Yeah.
Your favorite Skylander, as of this moment, which character?
Thumpback.
So.
I did the voice on Thumpback. That's why.
Can you do the voice right now?
Hail to the whale!
Great. Thank you so much, Dan.
That's got to be a cut.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.